There are a crazy amount of arcade game clones, and in this part I'm going to cover clones of the popular arcade game Centipede. If you missed the first arcade clones video, then check it out in the description below. In that first part, I talked about the Pac-Man clone, KC Munchkin. The differences in KC Munchkin actually made it feel quite unique. I think the slight differences in art or gameplay in all these clones are what makes them interesting, so I'll try to highlight them. Doing more research, I found that the company that made KC Munchkin also made another clone of a popular arcade game. The company was Philips, and they released a sequel to KC Munchkin called KC's Crazy Chase. This game was a mixture between Pac-Man and Centipede. KC's Crazy Chase has an enemy that looks just like Atari's Centipede character. The player you control chomps its mouth similarly to Pac-Man. They actually changed the way this character moves because it was too similar to Pac-Man. It used to chomp while it moved, but they changed it to where it rolls while it moves now. You move through a maze and power up by eating mushrooms or the Centipede's segmented body. The mushrooms in Centipede are obviously taken from another popular Atari arcade game, Centipede. I'll go into more Centipede clones in this video. Konami is a very well-known game developer now, but they got their start by cloning popular arcade games. More of these clones were listed in the first arcade clones video, but I didn't include this Centipede clone by them, Jackler. Jackler was also known as Jungler. Konami released Jackler to arcades in 1982. Centipede was released a year earlier in 1981. It seems like they saw the popularity of Pac-Man and Centipede and just wanted to mash the ideas and themes from those games together. You control a white centipede that moves through a maze. While you do this, you have to shoot other centipedes and collect fruit. You can run into enemies to destroy them if you have more segments than them. Defeat all the enemies in a level to move on. The maze idea and collecting fruit seems to come from Pac-Man. There are no mushrooms or other bugs attacking you like in the original Centipede. But let's take a look at some more Centipede clones that copied much more. These clones do not wait long after the success of the original to be made. Slither was released by GDI, or Game Domain International, in 1982, which is less than a year after Centipede was released. It was later ported to ColecoVision. GDI only existed for 12 months before filing for bankruptcy. Their only release was Slither, and it did not sell near well enough to keep the company afloat. The Slither arcade cabinet itself has a great retro look that attracts many arcade collectors to this day. The history of GDI and Slither is really interesting, and more information about the company itself and the arcade cabinet can be found in the description below. Slither was much more of a copycat than Jackler. The Slither arcade cabinet had a trackball, which is what Centipede had for controls as well. You move the tracker to shoot snakes that move throughout the screen. The movement and look of the snakes look just like the centipedes from the classic Centipede, the arcade game. Slither also has mutant gorillas and pterodactyls that create grass that gets in your way. If they touch the snakes, it will cause them to turn invisible, except for the glow of their eyes. Another big gameplay difference is that the ship in Slither could travel the entire screen and also shoot downwards. War of the Bugs is another clone that combines two popular arcade games to try and get the quarters from fans of both games. War of Bugs is also called Monstrous Maneuvers in a Mushroom Maze, even though maneuvers is misspelled. The combo is that of Centipede and Galaga. I mentioned in the previous video in this arcade game clone series that Galaga has had a long history of clones after its release. Here you can obviously see the mushroom field and centipede-like alien creatures throughout the screen, but also it draws a lot of influence from Galaga's color scheme, along with having a spaceship at the bottom of the screen that looks like it came from Galaga. It plays the same as Centipede, but the hitboxes to hit the Centipede in War of the Bugs is a bit off, so it seems a lot harder to hit it with your shots compared to the original Centipede. The spiders in War of the Bugs come a lot more often, and they just drop straight down instead of bouncing up and down. There is another bug-looking creature that acts more like the spider from the original. War of the Bugs was made in 1981 by a company called Food and Fun Corporation, Armenia Limited. I have never heard of this company, but the only other game this company has been credited with is a game called 4 Fun in 1. And speaking of arcade clones, let's talk about this game called 4 Fun in 1. The 4 Fun in 1 arcade cabinet was also released in 1981. From the title, you can guess that this game has 4 playable games within it. All 4 of these games are straight ripoffs or bootlegs of classic arcade games. Here's the menu screen showing the 4 games. There are slight differences between each game and the original that they copy. Galactic Convoy. This clone had the most changes from the original of any of the games in the 4 Fun in 1 arcade game, but that is not saying a lot. The gameplay is still the same as the classic Centipede for the most part. The Centipede in Galactic Convoy would create new segments seemingly at random, which did not happen in the original. Only one flea enemy would show up on screen in the original Centipede, but multiple fleas could be on screen in this clone. There's just small changes between Centipede and Galactic Convoy. The theme of the clone is more sci-fi than the original, as you are in outer space instead of in the woods. The Centipede is replaced with a ship with a pilot in it that has a long tail. There are no mushrooms, and instead they are replaced with shiny looking objects floating in space. Galactic Convoy has a spaceship that you control at the bottom of the screen that is bigger than the original blaster in Centipede. This ship is the exact same sprite and uses the same sound effect as Galaxian Part 5, which is another one of the 4 clone games in this bundle, which we'll go over later. The next game on the list is Scramble Part 2. I don't understand the Part 2 in the name, but this is obviously a Scramble clone. I mean, they didn't even try hiding that. The original Scramble was made by Konami in 1981. Here's what the original Scramble looked like. It is a side-scrolling shooter. Rockets lift off from the ground at you, and a swarm of meteors come from the opposite side of the screen to hit you. You have to dodge all these enemies. The ship you control can shoot bullets straight ahead, and also drop bombs from above to hit things on the ground. The bombs you drop are also needed to hit fuel tanks to refuel. The gameplay of this clone has not changed from the original. There are only a few small changes. One interesting change is due to a limitation of the 4 Fun in 1 cabinet. The clone's cab only has one action button, while the original Scramble had 2 action buttons. So when you hit the lone button on the cloned machine, both the bullets and the bombs drop at the same time, when in the original you could hit one button for the bullets and the other button to drop bombs. Another weird quality of life change is that the clone allows you to continue your game with more quarters if you die, making it a bit easier to beat the game than the original arcade game. 2 most notable graphics changes were made. The fuel tanks in the original said fuel, while this clone has different looking gauges that say gas. The mystery bases from the original were changed to buildings that had HQ written on it. Galaxian Part 5 is next. This Part 5 is obviously a Galaxian or Galaga clone. Galaxian was just the sequel to Galaga. The differences in this clone from the classic Galaxian arcade game are: the color scheme and sound was a bit off. It is a little more difficult than the original because the alien ships flew in a wider attack pattern. A small change that made a big difference in the gameplay was that the ship you control in Galaxian Part 5 is a lot faster and is more responsive to the controls, making the game a little bit easier. Ghost Muncher Part 3 is the last clone in this cabinet. You could probably guess, but Ghost Muncher Part 3 is yet another Pac-Man arcade clone. Most everything is identical to the original Pac-Man. There are the usual tiny changes in graphics and sound. Pac-Man is more orange than yellow in this clone. The maze was a little different. There were 2 extra escape tunnels. In some levels, when you eat the blinking dot energizer, then the maze would disappear. The gameplay is the same. The animations and sprites are obviously copied from Pac-Man. These games do not try too hard to be different from the popular arcade games they stole from. It is hard to believe that so many classic arcade games were blatantly ripped off like this. I know I covered a bunch of arcade clones in these last 2 videos, but there are still more. It seems like the coin-op classic arcade era in the 80s had an explosion of bootlegs and copycats. I will probably be adding to this series, so stay tuned and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you.